Hello everyone, I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to guide you into a peaceful rest tonight. I know many of you use these videos to help you unwind and drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, it really helps. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Get cozy, settle in, and let's journey into tonight's story. Relax, and let the soothing sounds carry you away. Hans My Hedgehog, A Tale of Magic and Fate. Once upon a time, in a land of mist-laden forests and rolling green hills, there lived a humble farmer and his wife. They were good people, kind and hard-working, yet burdened by one sorrow: they had no children. Every night, the wife prayed to the heavens, beseeching the fates for a child, even if he were only half a boy. One evening, beneath a silver-threaded sky, her wish was heard. Months later, she gave birth to a son, but not an ordinary son. He was half human and half hedgehog. His upper body, arms, and face were those of a boy, but from the waist down, he bore the bristly quills and stubby legs of a hedgehog. The villagers whispered behind their hands, calling him cursed, but his mother loved him dearly and named him Hans. Hans grew up different from the other children, shunned and ridiculed for his strange appearance. His father, ashamed of his unusual child, cast him aside. End quote, "You will never be a true son to me," end quote, the man spat, his voice hard with disappointment. Heartbroken but undeterred, Hans found solace in the company of animals. He spent his days tending to pigs and his nights playing his fiddle beneath the stars. One day, tired of his father's scorn and the villagers' cruelty, Hans took his fiddle and a few provisions, mounted his faithful rooster, a creature large and strong enough to bear his weight, and ventured into the vast forest. The trees whispered secrets in the wind, and the ground softened beneath his feet, welcoming him as one of their own. Hans built a home deep in the heart of the woods, atop an ancient oak where he crafted a house of branches and moss. There, he lived in harmony with the creatures of the forest. He played his fiddle every night, and his music wove spells in the air, enchanting those who heard it. Word of the hedgehog boy with the magical fiddle spread far and wide. One day, a lost king, weary from travel, stumbled into Hans's domain. The hedgehog boy, seeing the king's distress, played a tune that calmed his spirit. The grateful monarch promised Hans a reward. "Whatever you desire, name it, and it shall be yours." Hans, wise despite his youth, asked for the first thing the king encountered upon returning home. The king, thinking little of this request, agreed. Fate had a peculiar sense of humor, for the first thing the king met upon returning was his own daughter, a princess of radiant beauty and a heart caged by sorrow. The king, bound by his word, told her of his promise. Though reluctant, she was a princess of honor and prepared herself for the unknown. A year passed before Hans arrived at the castle, mounted on his rooster, clad in garments woven from leaves and night's shadow. He stood before the court, his quills glistening under the golden chandeliers. The princess, terrified yet intrigued, gazed upon him. "If you would have me, I ask only that you trust me," Hans said. His voice, though strange, held a melody that spoke to something deep within her. A great feast was held in their honor, but when night fell, Hans made a request: he wished to sleep apart, hidden behind a curtain of silk. The princess agreed, though curiosity gnawed at her. 3 nights passed in such a manner, and on the 4th night, she stole to his chamber. There, beneath the candle's flickering glow, she found not a hedgehog but a man, a prince cursed by magic most ancient. His eyes, dark and deep as the forest, met hers. Before she could speak, the prince awoke, startled and in pain. His transformation had begun. Hans shed his hedgehog skin, but the agony of breaking the spell consumed him. The princess, realizing what she had done, wrapped him in her arms, shielding him from the world's cruelty. Her love and trust completed the transformation, and by dawn, Hans stood before her, a man, free and whole. The kingdom celebrated, for their princess had freed a prince and gained a husband of true heart. Hans, once abandoned and scorned, became a king of legend, his name whispered in songs of old. Thus, the tale of Hans My Hedgehog lived on, a story of love, fate, and the magic hidden in the heart of the world. Story number 2, The Forgotten Ward. The old St. Augustine Hospital had stood for nearly a century, weathered by time and tragedy. Nestled on the outskirts of Blackwater County, it was once a beacon of hope, but over time, it became a place whispered about in hushed tones. The hospital was operational, but a part of it remained locked away, Ward C, a section that had been shut down decades ago after a mysterious fire. Rumors circulated about strange occurrences, shadows moving in the dark, and ghostly wails echoing through the empty hallways. Dr. Eleanor Hayes had just transferred to St. Augustine. A skilled physician with a rational mind, she dismissed the tales as superstition. However, as days turned into weeks, she began noticing peculiar things, medical charts that moved, lights flickering without reason, and an eerie coldness that gripped certain hallways even in the peak of summer. One night, while doing her rounds, she heard it, a whisper, almost imperceptible, calling her name. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, she began investigating the abandoned Ward C. Hospital records showed that it once housed the most severe cases, mentally ill patients who required extreme care. The fire had supposedly taken the lives of a dozen patients and a few nurses, yet something about the reports didn't add up. Pages were missing, autopsy records were vague, and the cause of the fire was labeled undetermined. Determined to find the truth, Eleanor enlisted the help of an old janitor, Mr. Harris, who had worked at St. Augustine for over 40 years. Initially hesitant, he finally confessed. End quote, it wasn't a fire that killed them. It was something else. Something the hospital tried to bury, end quote. Late one night, Eleanor and Harris sneaked into Ward C. The air was thick with decay, dust swirling in their flashlight beams. The walls bore scorch marks, but deeper inside, there were strange symbols etched into the stone. End quote, they tried to cure what they didn't understand, end quote, Harris muttered. End quote, they weren't just sick. They were different, end quote. Eleanor felt a sudden chill. A guttural groan filled the air, and then, movement. Shadows shifted unnaturally, coalescing into a shape. A patient's voice, hoarse and ragged, echoed from nowhere, end quote, they left us to burn. They fed us to it, end quote. Before Eleanor could react, the shadows surged forward. Harris screamed, his body convulsing before he was yanked into the darkness. Eleanor ran, heart hammering, as whispers and cries filled her ears. Just as she reached the exit, she turned back for a final glimpse. The shadows parted slightly, revealing a scorched, grinning face staring directly at her. Then, darkness consumed it again. The next morning, the hospital staff found her unconscious outside Ward C. Harris was never seen again. When Eleanor tried to explain, no one believed her. Official reports stated he had, end quote, resigned, end quote, but she knew the truth. Ward C wasn't abandoned because of a fire. It was sealed to keep something inside. And now, it knew her name. Eleanor Cooten and #039, sleep that night. Her dreams were plagued with the image of Harris being pulled into the darkness. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the whisper again, more insistent, more familiar. It wasn't just calling her name anymore, it was beckoning. She spent the following days diving deeper into the hospital archives. Old newspapers, patient files, and even whispers from veteran staff painted a more sinister picture. The patients of Ward C had not simply been mentally ill, they had been deemed experiments. The hospital's former chief medical officer, Dr. Alastair Crowley, had led controversial treatments, procedures designed to extract, end quote, negative energy, end quote, from the human mind, but what exactly he extracted, nobody could explain. The night of the fire, eyewitnesses had seen more than flames. They reported inhuman shrieks and shapes moving unnaturally through the smoke. Some even claimed they had seen Dr. Crowley standing amid the fire, untouched, whispering in an ancient tongue. Determined to uncover the truth, Eleanor found herself drawn back toward sea, this time with a plan. She equipped herself with a recording device, a flashlight, and a worn journal she had uncovered, one that had belonged to a nurse who had mysteriously disappeared shortly before the fire. The entries spoke of voices in the dark, patients speaking languages they had never learned, and, most chilling of all, shadows with eyes. As she stepped into the ward again, the air grew heavier, pressing against her chest like an unseen force. The shadows writhed in the corners of her vision. Then she heard it, her name, but this time, spoken in the voice of Harris. End quote, Eleanor, help me, end quote. Story number 3, The Cursed Prince of Ravenswood. Once upon a time, in the shadowed heart of the Ravenswood, a kingdom lay forgotten by the world. The land was veiled in endless mist, the trees towering and ancient, their twisted branches whispering secrets no man dared repeat. At the heart of this forgotten kingdom stood a crumbling castle, its stones blackened by time, its halls echoing with the hush of lost voices. The people of Ravenswood lived in a state of quiet fear, for their ruler was no ordinary man, he was a prince born of both flesh and feather, a creature cursed by fate itself. Long ago, Queen Evelyn of Ravenswood had yearned for a child, praying desperately to the gods of old. Her wish was granted, but as with all gifts from the ancient ones, it came with a price. The child she bore was not fully human, his body was marked with dark feathers, his fingers talon-like, his eyes piercing as a bird of prey. They named him Prince Alaric, and from the moment of his birth, he was an omen of misfortune. The court whispered of dark magic, of an old curse laid upon the bloodline for sins long forgotten. His father, King Hadrian, a man hardened by war and loss, sought to rid himself of his monstrous son. He sent the babe into the forest with a servant, ordering him to leave the child where nature might claim him. But fate had other plans. The servant, a kind-hearted woman named Lysara, could not bring herself to abandon the boy. Instead, she raised Alaric in secret, deep in the woods, teaching him to survive where no man could. He grew strong, his unnatural gifts sharpening his senses, his mind keen and ever watchful. But the curse was not merely one of form. Alaric bore a darker burden, one that emerged when the moon reached its peak. Under the silver glow of night, he transformed fully into a great raven, his wings as dark as the abyss, his cries echoing through the land. The people of Ravenswood began to speak of a phantom bird that haunted the woods, a creature that carried the whispers of the dead. One fateful evening, as Alaric roamed the forest in his cursed form, he stumbled upon a weary traveler, a young woman cloaked in mystery. Her name was Seraphine, and she carried secrets of her own. She claimed to be seeking Ravenswood Castle, though she would not say why. Sensing something unspoken, Alaric, still in his bird form, watched over her through the night. When dawn arrived, he shed his feathers and approached her as a man. Seraphine was unlike anyone he had ever met, fearless, inquisitive, and utterly determined. She saw through his curse but did not recoil in horror. Instead, she asked him questions, her mind quick, her gaze unrelenting. Slowly, Alaric began to trust her, revealing the truth of his lineage and the dark history of Ravenswood. He spoke of the whispers in the trees, the warnings carried on the wind. He told her of the castle that loomed beyond the mist, where secrets festered and ghosts wandered the halls. But the curse was not merely one of form. Alaric bore a darker burden, one that emerged when the moon reached its peak. Under the silver glow of night, he transformed fully into a great raven, his wings as dark as the abyss, his cries echoing through the land. The people of Ravenswood began to speak of a phantom bird that haunted the woods, a creature that carried the whispers of the dead. One fateful evening, as Alaric roamed the forest in his cursed form, he stumbled upon a weary traveler, a young woman cloaked in mystery. Her name was Seraphine, and she carried secrets of her own. She claimed to be seeking Ravenswood Castle, though she would not say why. Sensing something unspoken, Alaric, still in his bird form, watched over her through the night. When dawn arrived, he shed his feathers and approached her as a man. Seraphine was unlike anyone he had ever met, fearless, inquisitive, and utterly determined. She saw through his curse but did not recoil in horror. Instead, she asked him questions, her mind quick, her gaze unrelenting. Slowly, Alaric began to trust her, revealing the truth of his lineage and the dark history of Ravenswood. He spoke of the whispers in the trees, the warnings carried on the wind. He told her of the castle that loomed beyond the mist, where secrets festered and ghosts wandered the halls.